What's up, everybody? A very welcome along to this week's Anfield Agenda podcast. And my goodness, has it been a week. Steve and Jack have joined me. We have so much to get through. Usually I do this introduction where I talk to Steve and talk to Jack. But look, we got to get straight into it because 1 week, Steve, in the world of football can be a lifetime, my friend.
Yeah, just a bit. It was funny, at the weekend they were talking about the Super League as if, because it had come and gone by that point. But, a week before they hadn't even heard of the thing, let alone had it kind of, destroy or, potentially destroy everything that we loved about football, etc., etc. It's it's just been completely mad. And I guess it's funny, now to kind of think of, where we go from here. That's the question now, isn't it? Really, it's not, it's not about looking about what happened, who did what, who said what. We can go around in circles to a degree with that kind of thing. It's what we do now, and for us as Liverpool supporters, it's how we, our relationship with the owners, our relationship with, with everybody that was involved, and what they've said and what they haven't said, and how they said it and when they said it, and all that kind of thing that contributes to how we go forward. And it's a funny one because I fully get the FSG out argument. I do. But I said this to you guys on our WhatsApp group the other day. Somebody else had put this on Twitter. I'm not going to claim credit for it, and I can't remember who put it on, but someone's posed the question, is it actually viable to have an owner or an ownership group that gets us to where we want to be in terms of success on the pitch, and also matches up to exactly what we want as fans off it?
The King Power Group. But
I don't know if it's actually possible.
Shall we start by unboxing this as it unravels? So let's go back to Sunday. We're all sitting around on Sunday enjoying some football. Then all of a sudden, Ole Gunnar Solskjaer's put in front of the cameras as this Super League news starts to drop. So we hear that we were supposed to have it. It's a Sunday. We're supposed to have an announcement on the Monday of the new Champions League format that had all been agreed. All the clubs had been agreed, and some of the things that let's call them the Super 12 at this point, because I can't think of any other way of describing them, wanted have been granted to them by UEFA with regards to easier qualification, coefficients, some legacy money, all this type of stuff had been agreed. So we thought, right, we'll have this announcement. And then, Jack, all of a sudden, Sunday night, it starts to build that there's this breakaway and that there's 6 English clubs and 6 other clubs that are signing up for this Super League. And there's a statement due at 9:30, which come and went. Interestingly enough, Real Madrid were playing at that time. Then we were told it was 10:30 because we were thinking it was Central European time. Eventually, Jack, 11:30, the worst looking email and the worst looking website that I've ever seen in my life was unveiled by the Super League, which shows us that Florentino Perez, one of the Glazers, John W. Henry, Stan Kroenke and Agnelli from Juventus were all teaming up as chairman and vice chairmen of this new fantastic Super League competition with a £2 website.
Yeah, knobheads, the lot of them. The Tenacious 12, I like to call it, Craig. But no, just a god-awful week, wasn't it? And, I know before this we've spoke about keeping, our answers as short as possible because we've got so much to go through. But it really I could talk to you all day about what's happened the last week. I think it's awful. I know Steve said there about, what's going on and FSG out and a lot of protests that we've seen this week, not just at Liverpool, but across other clubs too. I know Arsenal had a big one. Manchester United had a big one as well. But yeah, I'm just disgraced by it all still, Craig, to be honest with you. I'm not quite as angry as I was last week. But, the scripted video from John W. Henry isn't going to, wash over with me. And it's not going to be one that I accept.
What was he supposed to do? What was he supposed to do? What would you have liked him to do?
Don't get me wrong, Steve. I wasn't expecting more than that.
I'm just playing devil's advocate. What would you have wanted him to do?
I understand.
I think we've leapt too far ahead here. I think we've gone 2 stages forward. Let's try and go through this chronologically. So that statement came out, and we're all waiting to see what was then going to happen. So we then hear that the English clubs had forced Manchester City and Chelsea into this almost at the last minute because their PR departments went into work first and foremost. But what I think here, gents, and I'll put it to you both and see what you think, is I've had a bit of flack from the other side of the Atlantic because some American fans and some American people believe that the American owners of the English clubs have been picked on unnecessarily here as the driving forces behind this. And I put it to you both, gentlemen, that it's a clash of cultural differences here. We have the American model of sports, which is a collegiate model that often sees drafts, no relegation, and things like that, clashing with the European model of sports that is an open competition that awards places on merit and that there are relegation and promotion. So therein lies the difference between, I think, a group of owners who are used to owning a sports franchise or a sports club and being able to have a stronger say and closing it off, getting stronger commercial rights against the European competition, the model that we've all grown up with that awards places on merit. And that's the starting point, I think, and the crux of all this from the owner's point of view. They're looking to monetize their business as strongly as possible and secure finances for as long as possible. And in theory, and I say in theory, Steve, that sounds grand, but not in practice.
Well, it sounds grand from a business point of view, doesn't it? You know, you just guarantee this, whatever it was, a cut of 300 squillion dollars or whatever the amounts were. Yeah, I mean, it sounds fine, but then, you know, but as we saw during the week, you put it to the fan. You know what? You know, going back to the announcement, you know, you speak, you know, rightly quite disparagingly about the website and the announcement and stuff. It just reeked to me of something that no one ever thought was going to happen. You know, I was chatting to a journalist friend in the week, and he's a guy that works up here in the Northwest for local television.
Are you going to name drop?
Well, he's not like that. No, I won't name drop. But he was just saying, I just don't see it ever happening. This is kind of when it was still on the cards, and he's like, I don't see it ever happen because they haven't tried to charm us. You know, they haven't sent us anything. They haven't. It was. I mean, that whole thing was just. Yeah, I do a lot of work in PR, and like, you know, from a PR point of view, the announcement and everything around it was just. I mean, baffling to the point of like you're sort of scratching your head a little bit because, you know, a lot of very intelligent people were involved in that, and it just, the whole thing just didn't make sense. And then you have to think, well, why were they doing it? And you know, from a PR point of view, again, it was amusing when you hear, you know, poor old Chelsea and City come out saying they were kind of bullied or whatever. You know, I mean, if you think the City, the most, you know, powerful, you know, richest club in the world, weren't in on this from the start, and you live in cloud cuckoo land. The American thing, yeah, I don't know. I mean, wasn't just American owners, was it? It was, you know, there were plenty of other nationalities in there as well. And I think it was more driven by a desire to, you know, to earn loads of money and anything else. And it was about, you know, following a US model.
Jack, here's the thing that gets me. So I can understand Florentino Perez, Juventus, Barcelona. I can understand their want and need for more money. Florentino Perez is trying to redo the Bernabeu right now. I spoke to Graham Hunter during the week, who obviously has his finger on the pulse of Spanish football, and he was saying to me Florentino Perez's plan here was to use that money to bring Haaland and Mbappe in this summer. So I can understand that those clubs are all struggling, but I can't understand from the English perspective why they wouldn't want to stick the boot in while these clubs are struggling and why they'd want to bail them out. And then, Jack, it comes out that Barcelona and Real Madrid were going to be getting €60 million extra than the other clubs.
Yeah, I can understand the desperation from Barca and Real Madrid. I read somewhere, and again, this may not be accurate, but I read somewhere that La Liga has been the most affected league by COVID financially. We know Barca and Real Madrid are in so much debt as well. But I'll answer your question about the other clubs quite simply, Craig, and it's a word called greed. And for me, that's all it is. These clubs, these businessmen, they always want more. And for them, money talks. And you know, some of the figures that were announced as part of this deal was sensational figures, ridiculous amount of money. And for them, you know, we saw Kave Sodokol, and I've seen him disrespected for, you know, not naming a source for where he said this. But, you know, with his quote in the week where he said that for these owners, they think about financial gain first and then the good of the game second, is just a disgrace. I really think that is absolutely disgusting because, I understand they're businessmen first, and, for them, absolutely, we are consumers first and foremost. But for me, to buy a football club, you have to have
No, Jack, you're a legacy fan, mate.
Well, a legacy fan, but for me to buy a football club, you have to have some interest in the greater good of the game as well, and that should be.
That's what we think, though, isn't it? That's what we as fans. That's what we as legacy fans think.
Yeah, but it's how we think, but that's how everyone should think. And Craig spoke before about the American model and stuff like that, and it is very American. You look at the MLS and how that league's run. You look at the NFL, the NBA, stuff like that. That's almost what this Super League was going to be. And to completely remove the competition, I just think the whole thing is an absolute farce. It's a disgrace. And I never, ever, I'll speak about it today and I'll speak about it for the next couple of weeks while it's still around and, while we're still competing for some ownership of the game again and try, as I said last week, we may have got rid of the Super League for now, but there's still a lot of work to be done. But I want in a few weeks' time to never have to think about this ever again and to look back and laugh at the thought of this idea, because for me, this past week has been an absolute joke. And, the fact that we've allowed football to become a situation where we've been in this situation this last week, I think is ridiculous. And I think we as fans have to take some ownership too, because, sign Mbappe was trending the day after the Super League fell through. Sign Mbappe from Liverpool fans who saw the John W. Henry sorry video and decided that, it'll be fine as long as you give us Mbappe. How hypocritical is that? I hate the hypocrisy of it all. And, for me, as I said, I'm in a situation now where that has ruined the rest of the season for me. I got to the Newcastle game. I was working for the Newcastle game at the weekend, and it got to a point where I was like, you know what? I'm not even upset because I don't know how much more football I can take at the minute. I need a break from it, Craig. I really do.
Right, gents. There's a lot to get through there. So I want to come back and say, I want to broach a topic that Steve brought up. It's the idealistic view of us fans versus cold hard business, Steve, and what we should have, what should be realistic expectations. Now, what I've done is I've used this whole Super League thing in my head, just me as a football fan, and use that as a way to realise that since the Premier League was brought in 1992, we've all been complicit in this. So Sky and other media sources have jumped on the high horses because they've got vested interests. Us as fans have always been idealists and always will be, in a way. We'll support the club. We think there's a right and wrong way of doing things, yada, yada. But at the end of the day, we sold our soul when the Premier League annexed itself away from the rest of the Football League. So I'd like to use this whole fiasco as a way to try and figure out how we can redress that balance and we can stop a Bury from happening again, or we can stop a Bolton.
Yeah. I mean, it's difficult, isn't it? Because, like we said, this is not an overnight thing. And I fully take on board, what Jack's saying. And I'm not in any way trying to defend it or anything, but, we've come, we've crossed the Rubicon a long time ago on this, haven't we? We are well past that point of it being this kind of idealistic working man's game where people don't try and make money out of it. The reason that owners buy football clubs at whatever level is because they think they can make a quick buck out of it. That's the only reason. And yeah, there are some owners that are better at it, and there are some owners who do take into account the fans. And we thought, you could argue we do or we don't, but we thought we had an owner like that. There are some like the Glazers who literally don't give a stuff. And there's plenty in between, but the common factor is that they all want to make money. They all want to make money. I mean, unless you get a Abramovich, kind of, or a Sheikh Mansour who are, they're so rich they can have little playthings. Football clubs as playthings, but owners don't, in general, buy football clubs, to advance the fans' interests and to give the fans a lovely experience. I mean, a lot of them recognise that success on the pitch and off the pitch is related, so it all kind of works with some owners. But this is the problem: the idea that Liverpool could be, we've had this great success over the last 2 or 3 years because or largely because our owners have had the money to put into it because they're cutthroat businessmen. That's the reality of it, isn't it? And and when cutthroat businessmen get a chance to make a few more quid, that's what they do. And yeah, I mean, we hoped that they wouldn't, necessarily go down the way they've gone, but I'm not trying to defend it. Don't get me wrong. I agree with Jack. It's been a horrible week and it's been a horrendous experience, and I don't want to ever talk about it again. But we can't pretend that this isn't the way football is now. We
are in this really difficult position, I think, particularly as Liverpool fans, because I don't want to put. Again, you sound like you're apologising here on behalf of them, but I'm not. Yeah. I don't want to put FSG in there with the Glazers. They're not that type of owner. So have they made mistakes? An awful lot at this point. The 77 quid ticket thing, the Project Big Picture, the furloughing of staff, lots of other things. They've always come out and apologised. But this one feels particularly stupid because a quick chat with Klopp, a chat with any of the players, anybody would have given you the outcome that was going to come here by the way this was pitched. And Steve put it at the start. He's worked in PR. That's a PR disaster. That could have been sold so much better as a dream, as something, and explain to us why the money will go down through to grassroots football, and explain and promote more like they did to some extent about how it's going to improve the women's game and have a matching women's competition. There could have been a way to sell it, but at the end of the day, we still wouldn't have wanted it because we're used to our own way of doing things. So what I would ask is, what do we do here with regards to our owners? Because Jack's annoyed, I'm annoyed, Steve annoyed. Some of us are more pragmatic than others. Some of us are more bitter than others. Some of us look at the wider picture and the positive things versus the negative things. It really is, and I'll bring us back to an Ian Eyre quote from before, be careful what you wish for. Because we really are in a very delicate situation right now, I think.
Yeah, it's difficult. I've openly said before, prior to this, I was on FSG's side. I thought they were very good businessmen. Their runnings of the club, they'd made some mistakes, but they'd always made U-turns, rectified it, held their hands up, apologised. But for me, this was just one step too far from them. I completely agree with what Steve has to say. And I've had lots of conversations about this week. And you're absolutely right there, Craig, about being careful what you wish for. And, we could force FSG's hand in selling the club. And then, it could be the biggest mistake we've ever made. But one thing I will say is it just didn't wash with me, the whole video with the yellow roses in the background, the sorry. As Jurgen Klopp said, I think the day after, he hadn't had a conversation with John W. Henry after that. And, it was just an apology to Klopp via video as well. So it's heartbreaking what's happened the last week. It really is. But, I think it can be helped in other ways. We don't necessarily need to force FSG out. But the alarming thing for me wasn't necessarily just the decision to make the idea for the Super League. It was how quickly it happened. The news broke on Sunday, as you said, after the United game, Craig. And then there was an announcement a few hours later, and we were told by Sky and other media companies and corporations that, the clubs didn't really care about PR and that they were expecting it, really. So for me, that's what we need to avoid, things like that again. If they have a proposal like that, that's fine. Put it to us as the fans, put it to, the media. Let's have a vote as fans. Who wants it? Who doesn't want it? Let's see what we think of your proposals. But, for them to take ownership and for 12 greedy businessmen to go, this is what we're doing. This is how we're changing the game that is yours and that you all love. I think that is what the disgrace is here. And for me, that's where they broke the trust barrier of us football fans.
Steve, you said earlier on, you were playing devil's advocate. And I remember back to the day, I was straight on as soon as that news broke, and I was streaming for hours and hours, and loads of people were in, and I was demanding John W. Henry sit in front of a camera and talk about this. And to be fair, he did. But did the information that he was forthcoming with work with you? Did you feel like he gave a sincere apology? Do you feel like he had any duty to give an apology? How did it come across to you?
I I'm quite a naturally trusting person. I think I've always been like that, and I think I know people questioned the kind of PR style. Like Jack says, the yellow roses and all that kind of thing. That's been going on for years. People have been manipulating what people think of announcements or that kind of thing for years. Whether it's a yellow roses or whatever it is, someone holds a baby in a picture. It's there's a million ways that messages in all different facets of life are manipulated to make us the viewer think a certain way. So we shouldn't really criticize for that. I guess it kind of comes from whether you're fundamentally, skeptical, or whether you fundamentally trust, him, and you think you made a mistake. And I think, from my perspective, all of the, if we accept that all these owners are after money at the end of the day, all of them, I firmly believe that our owners are at the acceptable end of that nasty scale, if that makes sense. And the Glazers are at the opposite end, and other people are kind of scattered somewhere in between. But ours are at the acceptable end, and that doesn't mean they don't make mistakes, because we know they do. And I just this is actually kind of what made it so hard in the first place, isn't it? Because we were all under this impression, weren't we? I was the same journalist friend. He was going much bigger on Liverpool as a story because the United fans don't think anything different about their owners. Like, that was no surprise to them, but it was a surprise to us because we did trust them.
And that's the thing for me.
No, I fully get that.
But that's why it hurts. That's why it feels someone has cheated on you in a relationship. So at what point do you start to heal? And at what point do we, this has created more divisiveness amongst their fans. As if it wasn't already divisive enough with the struggle to get tickets and the locals against non-locals and all these other things that divide fans and the Liverpool way and, so many different things. This has probably created an even bigger divide at a time when we probably need to come together and have a grown-up conversation. But how on earth do you do that?
The important thing you said, though, Craig, was be careful what you wish for, and that's a phrase that came into my head a lot during the week, and it's really important because they could sell the club to one of these Middle Eastern consortiums or Sheikh Mansour types who've got more money than sense. Is that going to give us what we want? Would they have said no to a Super League? Probably not. I don't think so.
Do you know one thing I will point out, though? You spoke before, Steve, and I do agree with you about, the sort of spectrum of owners and the Glazers and the Cronkies being at, one end and FSG being at the acceptable end. But, again, playing devil's advocate with that, is it just that FSG are better at pretending that they care? Because, we've been fed bollocks slogans that we know is a load of rubbish now. Like, this means more unity as strength. We're led to believe that they, share what us fans believe. They share the feelings of the city of what we are as a club. But are they actually just better at pretending than owners like the Glazers? Because
it's a fair point.
I think that may be the case, and that's where the anger's coming from. And Craig said it then. You wouldn't accept this in any other walk of life. Like, they did go behind our back, and if they were the owners that we thought they were, and where we think they are on the spectrum, they would have come to us and gone, look, we've been asked this by Florentino Perez. This is what we propose. This is why it would be good for our club. What would you fans think? And I tell you what, as supporters, we would respect them so much for doing that. But no, they went behind our back. A few hours, it's released. Boom. You see that short statement from the club. And that was it for me as well. When we pulled out of the deal, overnight, it took hours before we had that apology off Henry. It was a very, very short statement, 46 words, I think it was. It was a disgrace. It really, really was. And
I looked at the Tottenham one that came out, just before, I think, and it had this thing from Daniel Levy. And my first thought was, I don't believe a word he said. I actually didn't mind I didn't mind the sort of more considered approach. I think the comparison with other walks of life is a bit tricky, isn't it? Because people that buy Hoovers or vacuum cleaners don't demand a say in how Dyson runs or how Hoover,
unless you are James Dyson, in which case you just send Boris an old text telling them to hurry things along.
You know what I mean? Like the fans in other walks of life aren't stakeholders in the same way. They're not emotionally invested. So this is kind of where the idea of fan vetoes or fan involvement in boards is totally individual to football, and it needs some thought, because it's we've seen the Germany model, etc., but it needs a bit of thought, I think, because fans goes back to what I said at the start about can we get what we want on the pitch with what we want off it, and a fan thinks in a completely different way to get to that point.
Yeah, and here's where I come back around to what I said earlier on. It was beautiful to see everybody unite and condemn this. So whether you're a Preston North End fan, a Liverpool fan, whether you're a fan of a club in Spain, Turkey, Germany, wherever it was, for that beautiful 48-hour period, we had everybody on the same page. And it was lovely to see, because we could have, as Liverpool fans, as United fans, as Spurs fans, gone, well, I'm all right, Jack, sod the rest, pull the ladder up. But that wasn't our initial instinct. As fans, we wanted a fairer system. So what I would try and say is I want to try and keep that positivity, forward momentum going, and not let it turn to anger, and try and find solutions. Now, how we do that are for greater minds than us three, probably, in all honesty. But it was nice to see that. And it was beautiful that was the reaction of unfairness, even for those that it benefited. I took some heart in that, Steve.
Yeah. I mean, you don't very often. I mean, we're going to, imagine we're going to see protests at the United Liverpool game, aren't we? Joint protests. And I mean, it takes something to create that. It takes something for Gary Neville to be a leader of people across all Premier League clubs. Like we said, it was an extraordinary thing. And
even political divide, Steve, everybody.
Yeah. I mean, that's a whole other question, isn't it? What went on politically, because I guess we're not going to, we can speculate. We're not going to see, exactly what happened. And then, Ed Woodward coming out and saying that, he absolutely didn't buy into the idea. And then it comes out that, of course, he was right in the middle of it. Obviously,
of course he was. Former JP Morgan Chase.
We're going to,
help them finance buying United. That happens to be involved in the Super League.
We're going to get this. For the next few weeks. Individuals and clubs trying to distance themselves from it, say, "Oh, I never fancied it anyway," but we were led by the crowd or whatever. I'd advise people just don't believe any of it, because I suspect they were all up to their ears in it, from the start. And yeah, like we said, it's really hard to understand how the players and Jurgen Klopp weren't even in one conversation, because like you said earlier, Craig, that would have cut it off. That would have given them all they needed to know. I mean, who knows? We could talk about this for the whole hour or so, but I want to push on, because we did actually have a new Champions League unveiled in the end, the Swiss system, as they like to call it. Now, I'm going to read out some of what this entails, but beforehand, I just want to point out that, again, like I said at the start, this does give those owners a lot of what they'd asked for, as in protection of qualifying for the Champions League based on legacy and coefficients. But for me, gents, this is ultimately something that is overly complicated. So we've seen the new Champions League format brought to a 36-team tournament. My initial impression was, if you want 36 teams and you want each team to play 10 games, make it 6 groups of 6. Make the 5 games home and away. There's your 10 games. Top 2 teams go through, and then find a playoff place to find the remaining 4 spots in the last 16. But what we've ended up with is the proposed Swiss-style system, which sets teams to play a number of games rather than facing every other team in the league. So we've got one 36-team league. In the case of the proposed 36-team Champions League, clubs are set to play 10 matches against opponents determined by a seeding system. The seeding system will be designed so that all teams play roughly even split amount of games against high, medium and low ranked sides.
Once all the teams have played their 10 games, the top 8 clubs in the 36-team league will progress to a competition's knockout stage. As a bonus, the top 8 would also guarantee their qualification in the following Champions League campaign. The teams that finish 9th to 24th would enter a playoff round to determine the other 8 sides progressing to the knockout stage. From the last 16 onwards, the new Champions League format will thereon be the same as the current system. So, yeah, pick the bones out of that, Jack.
You asked for short, snappy answers, so here's my short and snappy answer. If it's not broke, don't fix it, and I'll say that over and over again. It's a quote that was originally for politics, but it's a quote that goes across all walks of life, and it's more apparent now in football than ever because, I spoke before, like you, Craig, when I first heard of the Champions League format changing and this Swiss model, I didn't know much about it, and I thought, they're changing it, so they're making it where teams will play, will have more chance of playing a big game in the group stage, and, it will create probably more groups of death. But I think, when I saw this a few days ago, I thought it's absolutely ludicrous. It's ridiculous. And like you say, when you start to pick the bones of it, it makes you think, I wonder if this is a reason why as well that the owners pulled out the Super League, because when they looked at it, when they saw that UEFA were looking to try and put more money into it as well, and this gives them, like you said, Craig, some guarantee that even if they don't finish in the top 4 of the Premier League, that they can still be in the Champions League next season without having to win the competition. And for me, it's just ridiculous. I like the game the way it is, and I accept that, like it did in 1992, the game will evolve. But in my opinion, this really isn't the way to do it. And I saw Ilkay Gundogan come out today with a big a story, I think he called it. And I read it. And if you haven't read it, I suggest going to read it because I thought it was brilliant from him. But yeah, I don't understand why any of the players would want to get behind this either, because for me, it's not as bad as the Super League, nowhere near as bad, but, it's still a ridiculous idea. And look, these players play enough as it is anyway. We've been saying this for years. And, as Liverpool fans, we know Jurgen Klopp has been banging on about it for the last couple of years as well. We saw what happened last year when we had to play 2 games in the space of 24 hours in different continents. They play too many games. You don't need this. Keep football how it is. Go to Steve.
Here's what gets me on this. Something that jumps out off that to me and immediately rings alarm bells in my ear is, so the 8 teams that finish in the top 8 positions in the league will qualify automatically. Where's the incentive to concentrate on the Premier League? Where's the incentive there? If you know, all right, make sure we get top 8 Champions League and then we're sorted. Damn the league.
Yeah. I get that. Yeah. I mean, it sounds very, very, very complicated, doesn't it? It sounds very complicated, and I'm kind of, I'm leaning towards Jack saying if it's not broke. What was the issue with the Champions League? Well, the only issue is that occasionally big teams aren't in it. That's the only issue they're trying to fix here, isn't it?
And money, more money.
Yeah, but you get that by being in the Champions League. So
yeah.
What they're trying to fix is occasionally you get big teams not in it. And so they're trying to fix that. And from a spectacle point of view, right, purely as a fan, it's fine, isn't it, to see, you're going to see more better quality games. You're not going to see 5 and 6-0. You're going to see, you're going to have the top teams in there every year. And I guess this, there were probably people on the equivalence of podcasts, going back to when the Champions League as it is now, was formed, probably saying, well, if the European Cup's not broke, don't fix it. And actually now, we quite like it. So that's the argument. But like I said, the only reason it's being changed is because occasionally big teams aren't in it, and they can't have that. That's
so what's the difference to the Super League then? That's my ultimate point here.
Yeah, there is
I said they got a lot of what they'd asked for, and Steve Parish came out, the Crystal Palace chairman, and said that there's already something like 30% payments go to legacy teams from the Champions League from what they've asked for. So it does seem like you wonder why they went ahead with the Super League if they'd got a lot of the concessions that they'd asked for, which, by the way, seem pretty unfair, if I'm being honest.
Yeah, I mean, we'd have to get them on to ask them, wouldn't we? Because it can only be it can only be more money, can't it? That's the only thing. And going back to Barca and Real Madrid, they haven't got any, and they want to do all these wonderful things and sign all these amazing players like they always have. It's just a bit of a mess, and the format of the Champions League doesn't. As long as it's not a Super League, a closed-off Super League, we're still going to have teams competing to qualify. It's going to get a bit more complicated, but I need some tweaking, need some simplifying possibly, but I can get my head around an evolution of something that we like.
I'm just confused. I'm confused, Jack, that we don't know how many teams qualify then from the Premier League automatically, or the Scottish League, or the Italian League, because what happens if X, Y, and Z happens and Team 4 doesn't finish here? It's already, we already have a load of unanswered questions here. So what we said about how the Super League was pitched from a PR perspective, I'd almost argue that this has been pitched terribly as well, because it's been overly complicated.
Well, try explaining this to the missus. I struggle as it is with the current format, and it's a lot bloody easier than this. It's hard because for me it seems relatively straightforward. Yes, it doesn't make money, as much money as maybe the Swiss model would, and if you have bigger games and you always have the big clubs in there, I get that. But football evolves. You look at the big clubs from when I was very young and 15, 20 years ago. You look at your Leeds, your Forests, your Villa, European giants. When I was very young,
part again, William. Go on.
I'd left uni by that point.
But football evolves. That's the beauty of it. That's what we love about the game. And for me, to put guarantees in there, we were called legacy fans. They're almost calling these clubs legacy clubs. But football evolves. Look at Arsenal over the last few years. Look what they were like.
They haven't evolved, mate. They've been shite all the way through.
Well, yeah, they've gone backwards. But you look at success stories like Leicester. Steve said, before when he alluded to it at the start of this video about the perfect owners. For me, you look at the perfect owners, the King Power Group. What they've done there is unreal. Really, really impressive. And for me, they're a really impressive club, Leicester. And what UEFA are trying to do with this model is stop things like that. And for me, it's a disgrace. And, I wish as a community of football fans, we could put the same sort of energy into, getting rid of this model that we did with the Super League. But I think right now a lot of people are fed up with the whole thing. But I almost think as well that could have been a bit of a distraction away from what is going on with this new Champions League model, because it's not as much of a disgrace like Steve said, but there's not any real huge differences, are there? So it could have been a distraction this whole time to distract us away from what UEFA are doing. So yeah,
they're not bastions of morality either.
No,
let's clear that up as well.
They were last week.
And neither FIFA or the EFL or the Premier League. Don't forget what we went through last year with the Premier League, with the whole null and void stuff. And we have to talk about Karen Brady here while we're talking about that, folks. We have to miss Baroness Brady into this conversation, because God love her, Steve, she galloped in on that high horse yet again.
Well, didn't they all? I mean, they all have over the last week or so. Yeah, I mean, she, she was Captain Void, wasn't she, last year? And then, yeah. I mean, look, all that tells you is that they're all kind of the same. We're talking about a load of, like we said on the emergency pod last week, don't think for 1 second Karen Brady wouldn't have had West Ham in that Super League given half the chance, because she 100% would.
All last week was missing for me was Mike Ashley coming out and saying how ridiculous it was. That's all it missed for me. Imagine Mike Ashley coming out and saying how disgraceful these billionaire businessmen were.
All the shirts will only be available in Sports Direct stores. That's what you're waiting for there. Steve, bit of Ibrahim Konate, mate. Can I interest you in a bit of Konate?
I have nothing to add. I have nothing to add other than what's Fabrizio Romano was big a couple of days ago, wasn't he? I'm wary of. There's people that I talk to, and I'm wary that I'm into the position where I only ever call them when I've got something to ask them. Something football news wise. So I'm having a beer with David Ornstein this week, so I'll pick his brains and see what he says. But it seems like it's, a lot of good sources. Christian Falk as well, said it was a pretty much a done deal. So, and I was chatting to someone after the whole Super League thing, and I said to someone, what we won't get is a confirmed signing, but I bet we get one that's not too far away. And obviously, that's what that's the world of PR, isn't it? That's how it works.
Here's where I am, Jack. I look at this, right, and I look at my little black book like Steve does at times like this and see, right, who can I ask? Who can I reach out to? Who am I comfortable enough to ask on this? And I've got to say, I've got very little contacts in the UK on these things. Germany and Spain are probably where I'm strongest. So what I've noticed, and I wondered if you've seen this as well, is since the Brendan Rodgers days, the local, the James Pearces, and they're not getting anything because the club have closed up shop. They've been very good about keeping things in. So we're seeing leaks when they do form come from Europe, from the other side of the deal. So in this case, it's Christian Falk, who's obviously very strong in Germany after Fabrizio Romano. That's no accident, mate. I think you got to give the club some credit for being able to close up shop like they did after the Brendan Rodgers days. But this, as Steve said, you could see this coming a mile away, but it still doesn't mean it's not a good deal.
It wasn't just after the Brendan Rodgers days, was it? That Van Dijk deal changed football. We were very lucky to get away with some punishment, I think, because there was a lot of news. Southampton really weren't happy with it at the time when we initially made our move. We had to wait. We had to be patient, and since then we've had to be a lot more sensible and change how we work. And you're very right there, Craig. We talk about these days. It's always bad news, Pierce, and it's the same with, the Echo and their journalists like Paul Gorst and people like them who, often shut everything down until it's 100% because I feel like that they don't know. But I do have to say that, I interviewed James Pearce, must have been back in January now, about potential signings in the summer, and Konate was the man that he pointed out. So, I do think they're in the loop. I do think they probably knew the interest that Liverpool had, but you're quite right. It seems to be the journalists from elsewhere that know the news before our lot do.
It's quite high stakes. It's quite high stakes for the Echo guys, particularly, and for James Pearce, I guess, as well. I know journalists who I've talked to that have broken a Liverpool story and then had a nice little phone call from somebody at the club saying, "Would you mind not doing that again?"
Yeah, and look,
you want relationships to remain, don't you?
We all know these journalists somewhat in some capacity, whether it be James Pearce, David Ornstein, and they're people of the highest integrity who don't in any way ever want to deceive anybody and work to very high standards. So I don't like when they get a bit of grief because, as you said, Steve, they have to be factual. So they mightn't break a story, but if they come out with it, it's happening. Like if they say something is happening, it's done.
Dave Ornstein, I worked with him for years at the BBC. He's a top man and he sources things double, triple sources. If he says something, like it's bang on pretty much.
Yeah, like if the firm on Twitter is putting something out, it's a little bit different to James Pearce or Melissa Reddy or David Ornstein or somebody like that.
Or Indicator, of course.
Indicator, yeah.
Of course. Well, we're talking about centre-backs and, I think we'd all welcome Ibrahima Konate. We spoke about his injury before and it was one drawn-out injury, but it also leads us to the question, Steve, what would you do around the Ousmane Kabak situation?
Oh, 100%. I'd sign him, 100%. I think if you're talking about the last few months as being an audition, I don't think he could have done any more. Absolutely no more. He's a 20-year-old lad who was parachuted into an absolute carsy, just an absolute mess with people falling, bodies lying around him, and he's getting better and better and better every week. And we'll talk about the Newcastle game in a minute. I thought he had a really, really, really good game. There are a few moments when he squared up one-on-one with Alain Saint-Maximin, and he was fantastic, I thought. And he's quicker than probably people give him credit for. He reads the game well. He's aggressive, and like I said, 20 years old. I think there's a really good player in him.
So are you saying sign both?
Yeah, both if you can. Yeah, definitely.
I'll back that. Jack, yourself?
Yeah, it's the same for me. When Kabak first came in, he had his critics, didn't he? After his first couple of games, he didn't have it easy. He took his time adjusting. But he's adjusted, and he's looking like a good little player. Steve, mentioned how good he was at the weekend then. Don't forget as well, he was booked early doors. He had to cope with that yellow card hanging over him from very early on in the game too. And he's impressing me. And for me, he's a player that has had time to learn the system too, and it's a no-brainer to sign him in the summer. Schalke obviously going down now as well, so maybe we'll get him for a bit of a cut price fee and less than the 18 million that we had originally agreed. And for me, it's an absolute no-brainer. As I say, as I've said before, we've got all three of Van Dijk, Gomez and Joel Matip coming back from long-term injuries. So, their fitness is going to have to be managed very, very carefully throughout the whole of next season. There's no timescale on any of their returns. So, for me to have 5 top-class centre-backs going into next season is a must for Liverpool. And, bringing in Kabak and Konate would give us precisely that.
During the last week as well, Steve, a couple of games of football broke out on Monday.
Believe it.
On Monday and on Saturday morning or Saturday early afternoon as well. And once again, mate, capitulation.
Yeah, it's a pretty similar pattern, isn't it? We're seeing this. We've seen it early in the season. We battered West Brom for half a game and then let them back into it. When it was 1-0. We didn't even get the early goal against Brighton or Burnley, but we were on top early on and then let the game go. 20, 25 minutes to go, and the same thing happened in these 2 games. Leeds, I thought we played well in the first half. Deservedly we're on, in front, and then let the game go towards the end. And Newcastle, there was just something about it, wasn't there? It just reeked of a last minute equaliser. I tweeted about it at half time. Almost in jest, more than anything else, because it was just we missed that many chances in the first half. I mean, to be fair, if you're looking positively, I haven't seen us create that many, really genuinely clear-cut chances. It could easily have been 4 or 5-0. Someone said the XG was only about 2.9 or something. I thought it'd be like 6 or something. They were genuinely good chances. Somebody else posted some stats on we've talked them on this podcast. For a lot of time about Fabinho playing centre back, and I just can't get my head around it still. While we have walking centre halves of any description,
sorry, Steve.
It was something like the stat I read was something like the last 7 games with him playing centre back against the last 7 games with him playing centre midfield, and the last 7 with him playing centre midfield, we won 5, drew 1, lost 1. With him playing centre back, we drew 3, lost 4. That tells you everything that you need to know.
All I am saying is that Ben Davies must be absolutely shite because, we were told by Klopp, weren't we, that when Fabinho went back in midfield and it was a much better performance that we'd never see it again. And all of a sudden, Phillips gets a knock and we have to see it again. And, we signed Ben Davies in January and we've not seen him yet. He's been locked in Klopp's basement. But all it
needs now is for Davies to be thrown on up front in one game and we've come full circle.
He was definitely bought in. I'm not having it any other way. He was bought in for his knee, so that if we got to the Champions League final, surgically remove it from him and stick it on Verge. That's the only reason, because or if the owner saw it as a quick way of getting profit, because obviously we know that he was so close to joining Celtic for a small fee, and maybe in the summer there's a guarantee that Celtic are going to pay a lot more than we paid, maybe double the money that we paid for him. That's the only thing I can think. But I've been saying for the last month or two now that I don't think we'll ever see Ben Davies play for Liverpool, because I just don't. I'm like Steve. I don't understand why, when we have fit centre backs, we have Reece Williams as well. Don't forget, who's not really played since his mistakes against United in the cup. For me, I just find it ridiculous that we're still seeing Fabinho at centre back. I really do.
Yeah, it's mental, and it's no accident that you look at the 2 draws again, and there's 2 games Fabinho's and been dropped back to centre back. It isn't. But I want to throw one last thing at you both before we finish up, and that's a transfer story that broke this week. That is one that I'd usually swat away, and one that I'd usually say no nonsense to, and that's Ousmane Dembele. And the only reason I bring it up is because I didn't realise he's only got 1 year left on his contract at the end of this season, and that Barca probably can't afford to, Steve, offer him the type of wages that he probably want. So I wonder, is it worth a punt?
I mean, well, it's definitely worth a punt. He's been one of the, I mean, if you had £1 for every time he's been linked with Liverpool in a newspaper, you'd have a lot of money by now, wouldn't you? You'd be
living it. You'd be swarming at Greg sausage rolls. You'd be
drowning the Super League out of it, wouldn't you? It's been a lot of times, and it's there's a Dortmund link in there, isn't there? There's a few
he
things
rented
going.
Klopp's house.
Yeah, there's a few things going for it. And there always have been. He's clearly a phenomenal talent. He has been since he came along when he was very young at Rennes, wasn't it? Yeah, I mean, he falls into the category of, if he's available, there'd be 10 top clubs wanting to sign him, because I think he is a really good player, and he's still quite young, isn't he? He's still probably only 24, 25.
I think, is he even that old? I think he's probably about 23, maybe something like 23. So I put it to you this way, Steve. Let's see. We've seen news this today, actually, that Shaqiri might want out. Shock horror, he's been available for the last 2 windows. But if we could move on Origi and Shaqiri, and let's say even bring in 27 million quid between the two of them, and the Dembele price is the 40 to 50 million that's been spoke about. It's Michael Edwards here, Jack. Nothing's impossible.
This is the guy that got 20 million for Dom Solanke, don't forget. I mean, that makes Origi worth about 50.
When you see Ben Davies joining Juventus as the late replacement this summer.
He'll join Bournemouth for 20 million.
Dembele's 23, by the way.
Yeah, wow. He's been around a long time, hasn't he?
So what are you thinking, Jack? Would you take a punt, or do you think there's better value elsewhere? I only bring him up because of the 1 year part of his deal.
Yeah, I think there's better options, but I also recognise his talent. I think his time at Barcelona hasn't been what he dreamed of, hasn't been what Barcelona thought they'd get from him. He's had his injury problems, he's had his attitude problems. Loves a game of Fortnite, does our Ousmane Dembele. But it would be an interesting deal, and we could do worse. We could do a lot worse. Like Steve said, I don't know if I buy into it too much, because of, we seem to get it every single year with Ousmane Dembele. We'll have, Goetze and Royce soon as well. Then the Nabil Fekir one will come back.
Don't forget Lorenzo Insigne, that popped on Isco.
Yeah, we'll get them all this window. I've got my bingo card at the ready.
The best Ergakan Kikir. That's another one.
Hey, I do think there's some mileage in Jadon Sancho.
That was it. That was interesting. I was going to bring that up because I said that was the last topic. Let's get greedy. Salah has a tricky situation coming up this summer. 2 years left on his deal. You're not going to want him to go into 18 months. So something has to be resolved one way or the other for me this summer with Mohamed Salah. So what happens if you don't get Champions League football? And the Sancho stuff, it's very interesting, but I've only really seen it from one European source. But I'd like your opinion on it, Steve. I'd like to know what your thoughts are on the Sancho situation.
I think there's some mileage in it. Yeah. I think there's some mileage in it. I mean, he probably falls into the category of only if we're in the Champions League, doesn't he? Probably. But yeah, I mean, we know there's definite interest, don't we? Has been clear for. I mean, why wouldn't there be? He's a phenomenal, English talent who will probably jump at the chance to come back to England and join a top team. So yeah, I think it makes a lot of sense. The only thing is if they were adding to the forward line, would they want a real number 9, rather than another wide player? But yeah, I think that's one to keep your eye on. Though I just have an inkling.
And for you, Jack, are we going yes for that, or are we still looking at the likes of Mailing or Patson Daka or?
Well, I think if all three of our front three stay, there's no chance. I think Sancho would only happen if there's a worry about Mohamed Salah wanting to leave because of the lack of Champions League football, or if somebody else wants to move on, or if we get a huge offer for one of the front three. I can't see us bringing him in on top of the front three we already have. And I asked the question: Is there a top club in England that wouldn't be interested in Jadon Sancho. You know, he's a top young talent, so I do think it probably does have legs, and Jadon Sancho will probably be one of the lads that we look at if you know, one of those, if we are trying to replace one of those front three. But you know, I think I saw again from the Echo today that, you know, the plan is to bring in someone like Patson Daka or Marlon, or someone of that caliber to add to our front, to add to our attacking options, rather than, you know, a marquee signing such as Jadon Sancho and expecting someone to leave. But I just have a horrible feeling, lads, that, you know, Salah is going to have to leave at the end of the season. I think he's going to be wanting to play Champions League football. He doesn't look too happy at the minute. We've seen, look, where would we be without Mohamed Salah this season? His goal tally is ridiculous. You know, he's been outstanding for us, and I just have a horrible feeling that, you know, he's gonna be wanting to play Champions League football, and he may look elsewhere to get that at the end of the season. But, you know, for me, I would love Jadon Sancho. I think he's a top player, but I love our front three. And, you know, if we can have all four, then yeah, I'd snap your hands off. But if we're saying have Sancho and we see Salah leave, I'd say no chance, no way I'd want that.
We are set up for a very, very interesting summer. Any final points before we move on and finish up, Steve?
Well, only that it finally dawned on me, you know, at the weekend, that we're probably not going to get Champions League football. And I think, yeah, that comes into this, you know, discussion about transfers, because it will impact on it, and it's not a criticism of any players. I know Klopp likes to say, doesn't he, that, well, we don't want a player who only wants to come for Champions League football, but I don't think it's a criticism of a top player to think he wants to play at the very top level. You know, these players don't have the same affiliation as we do, and you know, these things like Champions League football are big attractions for them. So that's going to be a massive thing. And you know, it sort of dawned on me. I just looked at that end of that Newcastle game and I thought, you know what? We're not one of the best four teams this season. Like, we're just not. They might make a late charge for it, but we're not one of the best four teams. Leicester have been better. City, United, Chelsea, you know, they're all better than us, aren't they?
I just can't see how we go and win 5 games in a row now when we haven't been able to do it all season. I don't, like you, I don't see where this magic form just switches on. But no. I would also say that I would like to think, and maybe again, this goes back to me being a fan first and foremost, that a player will understand the mitigating factors as to why our season has gone this way. And if we were looking at a Sancho or whoever it might be, that they'll know it'll be 1 year, most likely, we're out of that Champions League. And with Van Dijk back, Henderson back, and Gomez back, and a few additions, and the manager we have, Jack, we're probably going to be there and thereabouts for the next few years anyway.
You'd hope so. I'm just not looking forward to seeing us play teams like Cranky Doodah on a Thursday night. You know, for me,
oh dear,
it's in the Europa Conference League.
No, but you know, once you reform the Champions League, our coefficient will be so good. We'll just get in the last 8 anyway, won't we? So it'll be fine.
Yeah,
we just need to get the 2024 thing move forward to next season.
Yeah, exactly. Our coefficient's high, so we're fine.
Bring in the Super League.
We've certainly done full circle there, folks. I tell you what a great place to leave it. Look, we'll have, I'm sure, lots more transfer gossip and lots more stuff. God knows what will happen over the next 7 days, gents, between now and we next talk. We could have a United World Alliance. Let's just wait and see what happens. But it's been a real pleasure and great to catch up with Steve Bland and Jack Gill. And thank you guys for listening as always. If you're watching this as a clip on YouTube, hit that subscribe button, drop a like on the video. And if you're listening to us on Spotify, Acast, iTunes, or anywhere else, leave us a review. Don't forget to make sure you turn on get automatic updates for all of our podcasts. Thank you to Steve, thank you to Jack, thank you to you guys. Up the Reds. We'll see you in a week.